History loves to pretend it was built by geniuses, visionaries, and brave leaders. Cute story. Tonight, we are looking at the other department. The people who ignored warnings, insulted common sense, challenged nature, trusted Mercury, forgot Gates, and somehow changed the world by being aggressively wrong. These are the most ignorant people in history. And yes, some of them had armies, crowns, laboratories, and terrifying amounts of confidence. 1. The Spanish garrison at Guam. In 1898, the United States cruiser Charleston sailed up to Guam and fired on the island because the Spanish-American War was already happening. The Spanish commander, however, had not received that very important little update called, "You are currently at war." Guam was isolated, communication was terrible, and the empire was basically running on delayed mail and vibes. So when the American ship opened fire, the Spanish did not think, "We are under attack." They thought, "Ah, a naval salute. How polite." The commander actually rowed out to apologize for not returning the salute because they did not have enough gunpowder. Imagine losing an island because your first reaction to enemy cannon fire is customer service. No battle plan, no defense. Just a man floating toward the invaders like, "Gentlemen, sorry about our manners." 2. King Charles VI of France. Charles VI ruled France during the late Middle Ages, a time when Europe already had war, plague, famine, and nobles behaving like angry rich toddlers with swords. Then, the king added one more problem. He became convinced he was made of glass. Not delicate, not emotionally fragile. Actual glass. According to later accounts, he feared people might bump into him and shatter the royal body into expensive little pieces, so he had iron rods sewn into his clothes for protection. This means the French court had to manage diplomacy, civil conflict, and a monarch who basically thought he was a walking cathedral window. Servants could not just say, "Your Majesty, please sit down." They had to think, "Please do not accidentally explode the king." Medieval government was already unstable, but this turned the throne into a museum exhibit with anxiety. 3. Thomas Austin. Thomas Austin moved to Australia and apparently looked at an entire continent full of unique wildlife and thought, "This place needs imported rabbits for my personal entertainment." In 1859, he released 24 English rabbits because he missed hunting them. 24. That sounds harmless until you remember rabbits reproduce like they are being paid by the baby. Australia had few natural predators suited to stop them, and the rabbits spread with terrifying speed, eating crops, destroying vegetation, damaging soil, and pushing native species into disaster. The government later tried fences, poisons, diseases, traps, and probably a lot of exhausted staring into the distance. All because one wealthy man wanted a familiar weekend hobby. Some people bring photos from home. Thomas Austin brought a biological invasion and said, "This should be charming." 4. Franz Reichelt. Franz Reichelt, the famous flying tailor, wanted to invent a parachute suit, which sounds noble until you see the testing plan. In 1912, he climbed the Eiffel Tower wearing his homemade invention, while friends and officials begged him not to jump. Everyone around him was basically performing the human version of a warning label. Reichelt ignored them, because confidence is apparently louder than physics when it wears a coat. Authorities believed he might use a dummy. Unfortunately, he decided the dummy would be himself. He stepped off the platform, and the suit did not glide, float, open, flutter, or even make a polite attempt. It dropped him straight down. The tragedy is real, but the lesson is brutally simple. If your invention's first serious test requires your own body and a famous tower, maybe schedule one more meeting with gravity. 5. Elagabalus. Elagabalus became emperor of Rome as a teenager, which is exactly the kind of sentence that makes history reach for a helmet. Ancient writers hated him, so some stories may be exaggerated, but the picture they paint is unforgettable. A young ruler with unlimited power, no filter, and the prank instincts of a spoiled demon child. One story claims he released lions, leopards, or bears into dining rooms after guests were drunk. So wealthy Romans could wake up beside predators and instantly reconsider every invitation they had ever accepted. Some versions say the animals were tame, But that would not help your heart if you opened your eyes and saw a lion breathing on your sandals. Rome needed leadership. Elagabalus offered surprise wildlife and imperial comedy, written by someone who should not be allowed near doors, guests, or animals. 6. William McGonagall. William McGonagall is remembered as possibly the worst poet in the English language, which is impressive because bad poetry has had a very long and very determined history. McGonagall, however, did not treat his talent as questionable. He believed he was brilliant. Audiences came to his readings not to admire him, but to experience disaster in literary form. They heckled him, laughed at him, and sometimes threw rotten food or fish. A normal person might pause and think, perhaps the poem needs revision. McGonagall seemed to think the crowd was simply too ignorant to understand genius. That is not self-confidence. That is self-confidence wearing armor and riding into a brick wall. He became famous precisely because he was so bad, yet he marched forward like Shakespeare had personally passed him the torch and forgotten to mention rhythm. 7. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna was many things: general, president, political survivor, and a man whose ego sometimes arrived in the room before the rest of him. During the Texas Revolution, after pushing hard across Texas, he camped near San Jacinto in 1836 and badly underestimated the enemy. His troops were tired, many were resting, and security was weak. This is not ideal when an opposing army is nearby and extremely motivated. Sam Houston's forces attacked in the afternoon, caught the camp off guard, and smashed Santa Anna's army in a battle that lasted about 18 minutes. 18 minutes. That is not a battle. That is a historical speed run. Santa Anna was captured the next day, and Texas independence became almost unavoidable because one commander apparently thought take a nap was a defensive formation. 8. Lord Timothy. Dexter. Lord Timothy? Dexter was an 18th century American businessman who looked like an idiot, acted like an idiot, made decisions like an idiot, and somehow kept winning like the universe had lost a bet. He had little formal education and became rich through trades that should have destroyed him. People allegedly told him to ship warming pans to the Caribbean as a joke because nobody there needed bed warmers. He did it, and they were reportedly repurposed for work with molasses. He sent coal to Newcastle, a place famous for coal, and still found profit during a shortage. He even faked his own death to see who would cry, then punished his wife for not crying enough. Dexter was not a business genius. He was a walking accident with accounting records, somehow turning terrible advice into money, while smarter people watched in pain. 9. Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang was the first emperor of a unified China, a ruler powerful enough to standardize writing, currency, measurements, and terror on an imperial scale. But even the man who unified China could not defeat the ancient human weakness of wanting to live forever without reading the ingredients. Qin Shi Huang became obsessed with immortality, and his court alchemists offered him elixirs containing mercury. To modern ears, that sounds like drinking shiny poison because a wizard in a robe said, "Trust me." Mercury looked mystical, moved strangely, and seemed otherworldly, which made it attractive to people who did not yet understand toxicology. The emperor consumed it, hoping to escape death, and died at 49. The man searching for eternal life basically swallowed the chemical version of absolutely not. Immortality remained unavailable. Poison, sadly, delivered quickly. 10. Ferdinand II of Naples. Ferdinand II of Naples is often pulled into stories about rulers who feared modern technology, especially steam engines, as if locomotives were iron demons coughing smoke across the countryside. The exact claim that he tried to ban trains because they were powered by actual demons is hard to treat as solid history, because his kingdom did build early railways. But the broader stupidity is real enough to deserve a seat at the table. Many 19th century rulers looked at industrial technology and saw not transformation, but inconvenience. Steam power was changing transport, war, factories, trade, and communication, while conservative courts worried about noise, disorder, and the terrifying possibility that society might move faster than a nobleman's carriage. Whether or not Ferdinand personally feared demon trains, the mindset was classic royal denial. The future is arriving, and the palace is asking it to lower its voice. 11. Thomas Midgley Jr. Thomas Midgley Jr. helped develop leaded gasoline, which is one of those achievements that makes history say, "Please stop helping." By the 1920s, lead was already known to be dangerous. Workers exposed to tetraethyl lead suffered hallucinations, illness, and death. The warning signs were not subtle. They were basically banging pots outside the laboratory. Midgley's response was to publicly demonstrate the product's safety by pouring the substance on his hands and inhaling its fumes. This is the scientific equivalent of proving a bridge is safe by licking the traffic. He later suffered from lead poisoning himself, because chemistry does not care about public relations. Leaded gasoline spread around the world, poisoning air and people for decades. Midgley did not merely make a bad call. He performed bad judgment on stage and called it confidence. 12. Nero at the Olympics. Nero did not compete in the Olympics like an athlete. He competed like a dictator who brought his own reality with him. In 67, he entered Greek contests in music, theater, and chariot racing, because apparently ruling Rome was not enough applause for one man. In one chariot race, he reportedly used an absurd number of horses, fell from the chariot, and failed to properly finish. In ordinary sports, that is called losing. Under Nero, it was called victory because the judges enjoyed being alive. They declared him champion anyway, proving that ancient Olympic scoring became extremely flexible when the contestant could execute you. Nero returned to Rome with prizes and self-esteem inflated to dangerous pressure levels. He did not win because he was great. He won because everyone else was trapped inside his ego and looking for the exit. 13. The defenders of Constantinople. Constantinople did not fall in 1453 because of one tiny mistake alone. The city had been hammered by Ottoman cannons, starved by siege, and defended by exhausted soldiers facing overwhelming pressure. But one famous story says a small gate called the Kirkeporta may have been left open or unsecured during the final assault. Ottoman troops allegedly found their way through, spreading panic behind the defenses. Historians still debate how decisive this really was, but as a symbol, it is almost painfully perfect. The Roman Empire in the East had survived for over 1,000 years. It had faced Persians, Arabs, Crusaders, civil wars, plagues, betrayals, and endless political knife fights. Then, at the very end, history gives us the image of someone forgetting a door. Not a grand speech, not a heroic duel, just the world's worst closing shift. 14. Mao Zedong and the Sparrows. Mao Zedong's campaign against sparrows is what happens when a government decides it can defeat ecology with slogans. During the Great Leap Forward, sparrows were targeted because officials believed they ate too much grain. People were ordered to destroy nests, break eggs, and bang pots so birds could not land, forcing them to fly until they died from exhaustion. On paper, the plan sounded brutally simple. Fewer sparrows, more grain. Nature responded, cute theory. Sparrows also ate insects, and once their numbers dropped, pests such as locusts surged, damaging crops during an already disastrous period of policy failure, coercion, and famine. The sparrow campaign did not cause the catastrophe by itself, but it made a terrible situation worse. You cannot run an ecosystem like a political meeting. The insects do not read the slogans. 15. King John of England. King John of England had such a bad reputation that later storytellers barely had to exaggerate. In 1216, while moving across eastern England during a rebellion, his baggage train attempted to cross the Wash, a dangerous tidal estuary. This was not a cute little puddle, it was mud, water, shifting channels, and incoming tide with the personality of a thief. The royal treasure, supplies, and possibly parts of the crown regalia were reportedly caught by the water and lost. Imagine being king and losing valuables not to a rival monarch, not to a brilliant heist, but to wet geography. John was already unpopular, politically cornered, and militarily stressed. Then the landscape itself said, "Hand over the jewelry." He died soon after, leaving behind rebellion, ruin, and the unforgettable image of a monarchy mugged by mud. 16. William Preece. William Preece was a senior engineer at the British Post Office, which makes his famous dismissal of the telephone so wonderfully painful. When the telephone appeared in the 1870s, Preece reportedly suggested that Americans might need such a device, but Britain did not because it had plenty of messenger boys. This is one of those historical statements that arrives gift-wrapped for future mockery. He worked in communications, the exact field being transformed, and still looked at instant voice transmission and thought, but have we considered boys running around with notes? To be fair, early telephones were crude, expensive, and limited. But dismissing a world-changing invention because your current system includes children with envelopes is magnificent. The future rang, and Preece basically told it to send a boy. 17. Pliny the Elder. Pliny the Elder was one of Rome's great scholars, a man so curious that even an erupting volcano became, in his mind, a research opportunity with smoke. In 79, Mount Vesuvius exploded, burying Pompeii and Herculaneum under ash and destruction. Many people fled. Pliny, commanding a fleet at Misenum, sailed toward the disaster. Part of his mission was rescue, which deserves respect. But he also wanted to observe the eruption more closely because some intellectuals apparently see a mountain detonating and think, finally, primary sources. The coast became deadly, the air filled with ash and poisonous fumes, and Pliny died during the catastrophe. His courage was real, but so was the fatal curiosity. Most people see a volcano erupt and run away. Pliny saw it and accidentally invented extreme field research. 18. King Philip II of Spain. King Philip II wanted the Spanish Armada to invade England in 1588, which was already a wildly complicated plan, involving ships, weather, timing, armies, supplies, and the English not cooperating. Then his best admiral died, and Philip appointed the Duke of Medina Sidonia to command the fleet. The Duke was noble and important, but he openly warned that he lacked naval experience and suffered badly from seasickness. Seasickness, while commanding an armada. That is like hiring a dragon slayer who gets nervous around lizards. To be fair, the armada's failure had many causes: storms, English tactics, communication problems, and strategic confusion. But putting a reluctant, inexperienced, seasick aristocrat in charge of a giant invasion fleet did not scream unstoppable empire. It screamed, we value titles more than steering. 19. Jean-Baptiste Lully. Jean-Baptiste Lully was the superstar composer of Louis XIV's France, and he conducted music with a heavy staff that he slammed into the floor to keep time. This was before conductors used tiny, elegant batons, because apparently music needed to be managed like road construction. During a performance celebrating the king's recovery from illness, Lully struck the staff into his own foot. Hard. The injury became infected, and doctors advised amputation. Lully refused, partly because he loved dancing and did not want to lose his foot. This is understandable emotionally, but medically it was like telling gangrene, please be reasonable. The infection spread, and he died. Few people have contributed so much to French music and also been killed by rhythm. He did not miss a beat. The beat missed the floor and found his foot. 20. Empress Dowager Cixi. Empress Dowager Cixi ruled during a period when China desperately needed modernization. Foreign powers were carving influence from the empire. Japan was building a modern military, and naval strength mattered more than ever. Cixi is famously associated with money, intended for naval modernization being redirected toward the Summer Palace, including the restoration of a large marble boat. The details are debated by historians, and the marble boat was symbolic rather than literally meant to replace warships. But that symbolism is exactly why the story refuses to die. China needed steel, engines, training, artillery, and logistics. The court got a beautiful stone boat that could not sail, fight, retreat, or do anything except sit there looking expensive. Then China lost the First Sino-Japanese War. As military procurement goes, Decorative object that cannot move is rarely the strongest naval doctrine. 21. Pope Gregory IX. Pope Gregory IX did not single-handedly cause the Black Death by ordering Europe to delete cats. That internet version is too clean, too dramatic, and too convenient. But in 1233, his document Vox in Rama connected heretical rituals with devilish imagery that included black cats, feeding a wider medieval suspicion of cats as sinister animals. In a world already obsessed with demons, omens, witches, and spiritual panic, this was terrible branding for an animal that actually helped control vermin. Later plague disasters were driven by trade, fleas, rats, bacteria, urban conditions, and human vulnerability, not one papal opinion about cats. Still, the ignorance is deliciously medieval. People saw a small predator that hunted pests and decided the real issue was satanic vibes. The cats were doing pest control. The humans were doing panic with paperwork. 22. Arthur Zimmermann. Arthur Zimmermann wrote the kind of diplomatic message that makes future governments invent better shredders. In 1917, Germany wanted to distract the United States and stop it from focusing on Europe. Zimmermann sent a secret telegram proposing that Mexico join Germany in a war against America. In return, Germany suggested Mexico could regain Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. This was already an outrageous gamble, like trying to solve a kitchen fire by inviting a bear inside. British intelligence intercepted and decoded the telegram, then passed it to the Americans. At that point, Zimmermann could have denied it, called it fake, blamed mistranslation, or simply hidden under a desk. Instead, he publicly admitted it was real. American outrage exploded, and the telegram helped push the United States into World War I. Espionage is hard. Confession made it much easier. 23. Commodus. Commodus ruled Rome as if the empire were not a state, but a stage built entirely for his personal mythology. He believed he was a new Hercules, dressed the part, renamed months and institutions after himself, and spent huge energy performing in the arena. But this was not brave gladiator life. Commodus arranged advantages, fought staged opponents, slaughtered exotic animals, and demanded worship for spectacles that were less sport and more imperial theater with a death budget. Ancient sources also describe cruel performances involving vulnerable people, which moves the story from absurd into genuinely ugly. Rome needed administration, discipline, and political stability. Commodus offered muscles, costumes, and self-worship. He confused applause with legitimacy and fear with admiration. The empire did not need Hercules. It needed a functioning adult with paperwork skills. 24. Pol Pot and glasses. Pol Pot's Cambodia, under the Khmer Rouge, is one of the darkest examples of ideological ignorance becoming mass murder. The regime tried to create an extreme agrarian utopia by destroying cities, education, religion, money, private life, and anyone associated with intellectual or professional identity. In that nightmare, even looking educated could make a person a target. Wearing glasses, speaking a foreign language, being a teacher, doctor, engineer, student, monk, artist, or simply seeming too smart could lead to suspicion, imprisonment, torture, or death. There is no comedy in the suffering. The madness was that a government treated knowledge itself as contamination. Instead of building a perfect society, the Khmer Rouge destroyed families, institutions, memory, and human potential. Pol Pot did not prove that intellectuals were dangerous. He proved that anti-intellectual power is. 25. King Charles VIII of France. King Charles VIII of France died in 1498 in a way so stupidly preventable that it sounds like a warning from a castle safety manual. He was at the Château d'Amboise and wanted to watch a tennis match. While hurrying through a low doorway, he smashed his head against the wooden frame. Hard. Instead of treating this like a serious head injury, he continued on and watched the game, because apparently royal enthusiasm for sports outranked basic brain care. A few hours later, he collapsed and died. This was not a glorious battlefield death. No heroic charge. No poisoned dagger, no dramatic last speech under a banner. Just a king, a doorway, and the catastrophic underestimation of ceiling height. France lost a monarch because architecture won the first round. 26. Captain Edward Smith. Captain Edward Smith of the Titanic was not some random fool handed a ship's wheel after winning a raffle. He was experienced, respected, and trusted with the most famous passenger liner in the world. That is exactly why the iceberg warnings matter. On April 14, 1912, Titanic received multiple messages about ice in the North Atlantic. Some were passed along, some were mishandled, and the wireless room was busy with passenger traffic. But the ship still steamed fast through a dangerous ice region on a moonless night, across calm water that made icebergs harder to spot. This was not simple cartoon stupidity. It was confidence, routine, industry pressure, and the dangerous belief that modern engineering had made old dangers negotiable. Then the iceberg arrived with the coldest possible correction. Unsinkable was not a safety plan. It was a slogan with expensive furniture. 27. Trofim Lysenko. Trofim Lysenko was the Soviet agricultural boss who rejected genetics because reality did not fit the politics. He promoted the idea that plants could be trained by environment and then pass those acquired improvements to future generations. In simpler terms, he treated crops like they were good communists who could be educated into productivity. Real genetic science was condemned as bourgeois nonsense, and under Stalin, Lysenko's ideas gained enormous power. Scientists who disagreed were fired, silenced, imprisoned, or worse. Soviet biology was dragged backward for decades, and agricultural policies suffered because fantasy was promoted as science. Famines and food crises had many causes, but Lysenkoism made bad decisions harder to challenge and good science dangerous to speak aloud. He did not just misunderstand plants. He turned ignorance into official policy, which is how bad ideas become national disasters. 28. Ferdinand Magellan. Ferdinand Magellan had done the almost impossible. His expedition crossed the Atlantic, found the strait at the bottom of South America, entered the Pacific, and reached the Philippines. At that point, the smart move was simple: keep the mission alive and avoid unnecessary beach fights. Magellan chose the other menu item. He got involved in a local conflict on Mactan Island, partly to impress allies and demonstrate European military superiority. He underestimated Lapu-Lapu's warriors, overestimated armor and weapons in difficult shallow water conditions, and led a small force into a situation where boats could not properly support them. The locals fought hard, the Europeans became exposed, and Magellan was killed on the beach. His expedition eventually completed the circumnavigation without him. Imagine almost reshaping world history, then dying because your ego clicked accept side quest. 29. King George IV. King George IV loved glamour, uniforms, ceremony, luxury, and the heroic version of himself that existed mainly in his own imagination. During the Napoleonic Wars, he was safely in Britain, not charging across European battlefields. Yet later stories and courtly flattery helped create the impression that he had been personally connected to military glory, including absurd suggestions that he had played a heroic role at Waterloo. He had not. Actual soldiers fought and died there. George wore beautiful clothes, collected honors, and enjoyed the emotional benefits of bravery without the battlefield inconvenience of bullets. This was not unique among royals, but George had a special talent for making vanity look expensive. He seemed to believe that dressing like a warrior and standing near victory afterward was close enough. History disagreed, but his tailor probably applauded. 30. Hiroo Onoda. Hiroo Onoda was not ignorant in the goofy sense. He was trained, disciplined, and trapped inside orders that became more powerful than reality. During World War II, he was sent to Lubang Island in the Philippines and told not to surrender. Japan surrendered in 1945, but Onoda refused to believe it. Leaflets were dismissed as enemy propaganda. Newspapers were fake. Search parties were tricks. Family letters were psychological warfare. Decades passed, and he continued hiding in the jungle, carrying out guerrilla activity with a shrinking group of comrades while the world moved through the Cold War, television, moon landings, and disco. He finally surrendered in 1974 after his former commanding officer personally came to relieve him of duty. It is a chilling example of obedience so absolute that peace itself looked like a lie. 31. Lord Kelvin. Lord Kelvin was a scientific giant, which makes his worst predictions so entertaining in the dangerous way. He made major contributions to physics and measurement, but he also became famous for dismissing technologies that were about to kick open the 20th century. He expressed skepticism toward X-rays, doubted radio had much future, and rejected the possibility of heavier-than-air flying machines. Some exact quotes attached to him are debated, because history loves pinning wrong sentences to famous men like decorative medals. But the pattern is clear. Kelvin's authority sometimes made his skepticism sound more final than it deserved. Then the world immediately produced medical imaging, radio communication, and airplanes. It is comforting, honestly. Even brilliant people can stare at the future and confidently say, "Impossible," 5 minutes before it flies over their house. 32. Alexander Kerensky. Alexander Kerensky took power in Russia during 1917, which was like being handed a burning house and asked to improve the curtains. The country was exhausted by World War I. Soldiers wanted to go home, peasants wanted land, workers wanted bread, and the old monarchy had collapsed. The provisional government needed legitimacy fast. Kerensky decided Russia should keep fighting, hoping that military success would restore confidence and satisfy the Allies. Instead, the summer offensive failed, discipline collapsed further, and public trust drained away like water through a cracked bucket. Meanwhile, the Bolsheviks offered simple slogans to desperate people: peace, land, bread. Kerensky acted as if patriotic speeches could feed cities and refill trenches with morale. They could not. When a starving country asks for relief, answering with another offensive is not leadership. It is historical self-sabotage. 33. King Louis XVI. On July 14, 1789, Paris exploded into revolution. Crowds stormed the Bastille, seized weapons, and turned a fortress prison into the most famous symbol of a collapsing old order. Meanwhile, King Louis XVI wrote one word in his diary: nothing. To be fair, he was recording the result of his hunting, not giving a political analysis. But that is exactly why the detail is so perfect. The streets were erupting, royal authority was cracking, and the king's personal record basically said, "No deer today." It captures the deadly distance between Versailles and the people outside its gates. Louis was not necessarily too stupid to understand anything, but he was trapped in a royal bubble so thick it might as well have had curtains. The revolution was not invisible. He was just looking in the wrong direction. So now the real fight begins. Which one of these was the biggest historical idiot? The guy who drank mercury to live forever? The ruler who fought sparrows and lost to insects? Or the captain who treated iceberg warnings like spam mail? Drop your winner in the comments, and if we missed someone even more painfully clueless, name them. Defend your pick like a courtroom lawyer with a grudge. And if this video made you question how humanity survived at all, hit like and subscribe, because history has plenty more evidence.